Dear students, today let us start the discussion on 05th February 2016 newspaper. So in reference to this, the first article is very important and is related to the agriculture in India. Now let us see the situation. The first factor is employment elasticity. It means that the number of jobs generated for a unit of growth in a particular sector. In agriculture, the employment elasticity is very high. And in rural areas, the most of the poverty of India resides. 80% of the total poor in India resides in rural areas. And most of them are dependent on agriculture. If agricultural growth occurs, it reduces the poverty much drastically. And in the last decade, the number of people diverting from agriculture, that is farm sector to non-farm sector, has increased. And in India, in general, in the last 2 decades of the growth pattern, the increase in labor force and increase in employment, they are not proportionate to each other. The number of jobs created for the number of people are very less. So in these circumstances, what we have to do, how we have to revive Indian rural side? The farm suicides are increasing and rural distress is increasing from the drought-prone conditions. So in this context, the migration from farm to non-farm activity, though rampant, is not qualitative. People are migrating from low-income agricultural activity to non-qualitative non-farm sector. This situation has to be changed and we have to increase the agricultural income, and non-farm employment also need to be made more qualitative. So what we have to do in these circumstances? The first thing which is recommended is we have to increase the public investment in agriculture. The insurance and also irrigation, all these need to be improved. With regard to irrigation, a new central sponsored scheme is online in this budget. And on insurance, Prime Minister's Fasal Bima Yojana has been already announced. The minimum support prices, they are not in the reach of the alternative crops such as millets, pulses, etc. So in this context, to ensure the food security of the people, especially the protein security and nutritional security, the minimum support price for all the pulses and millets shall be encouraged. And the soil degradation is the major factor. So in this case, the organic matter in the soil is eroding and dependency on the pesticides is increasing. So the soil health need to be protected, and we have to imbibe the policy of waste to wealth and reframing the current fertilizer subsidy and new pesticidal management. With reduction in the pesticides, especially the commercial pesticides, have to be brought in. And crop diversification. So mostly ours is an irrigation intensive cropping. We have to move towards the rain-fed crops, especially the millets, pulses, etc., which are dual advantages. So it decreases our import burden and also increases the value. So finally, the research allocation in the budget is very less. So India has to revitalize its Atma, that is Agricultural Technology Management Agency, Krishi Vigyan Kendras, to serve as the agents of change in the farm sector. Finally, alternative employment, equality to employment, how it has to be developed. The agri-processing industry is not very much developed in India, and strong impetus to the agri-processing industry can provide for a revitalized agricultural sector. Understand that agriculture has its own advantages. So agri-based technologies and agri-based industries are never given due emphasis in India, and it is the time we look at them. Even startups, etc., we are looking them in the services sector. So why can't agriculture-centered startups can be taken up in India? Why can't agricultural universities can be the agents of change, agents of innovation? Why can't the biotechnology and other related innovations be given due emphasis under our startup policy program? So these are the issues we need to talk about. Coming to the how to protect India's trade interests in the growing trade diversion and fall in the exports. Now let us take this situation over here. Now the Trans-Pacific Partnership is coming up which has got the control over the greater than 50% of the global trade. So in this context, India cannot enter into the Trans-Pacific Partnership because of the stringent norms which are over there, which will be detrimental to India's interests. But however, as majority of the global GDP is going under this TPP agreement, India keeping itself away from TPP will have its own disadvantages. Now, how India shall overcome these disadvantages is the center of this article. Now, the first thing is the new issues which are not there in the WTO negotiations, they are being brought under the TPP. They include e-commerce, labor, competition, and providing for governmental procurement or equality of treatment in governmental procurement. All are the part of this. So in this context, India with like-minded nations has to strongly oppose this in WTO. And next is, as per the TPP, new regulatory regimes will be instituted by these countries who are the partners of TPP. So in this context, India shall strongly oppose these new regulatory norms that are violative of the WTO commitments. And after that, today the private standards are growing, and these private standards are also not covered by the WTO. For example, if you take about Sialkot incident in Pakistan, the Nike shoe company, it all of a sudden said it is not going to buy anything from there because it involves the child labor. So now it is not covered under WTO because it's a decision of a private company. So these private standards in the long run are going to deeply impact the business, and they have trade distortionary measure. So India also has to try to bring in these private standards under the law, under the WTO regime. And on the other side, from domestic side, India has to increase the competitiveness of its industry through development of infrastructure and also promoting for better, human resources development. And free trade negotiations, with regard to European Union, Canada, etc., there are certain drawbacks, that are certain challenges. And China promoted regional comprehensive economic partnership agreement, which is also closely integrating the ASEAN. India can join RCEP, close its free trade agreements with other countries as soon as possible so that India can be integrated with the global business. So finally, India has to understand that it has to raise its standards of quality. With regard to the global standards, then its goods and products will be better appreciated in the international markets. So the procedural safeguards to verify these standards also need to be installed in India. So these steps can make India resilient with regard to fighting against the international trade distortionary measures or diversionary tactics that are happening now. Now, with regard to the new budget, which is about to come, the disinvestment is most likely. Now, if you see the suggestions which are coming in the last week, what they say is India has to stick to the path of fiscal consolidation. So it has to improve its efficiency in expenditure. So it has to discourage the non-merit goods subsidies and also increase disinvestments to boost the growth. So for increasing the growth, it shall not compromise on its macroeconomic stability, especially the fiscal deficit target. So in this context, the oil PSUs and the defense PSUs, in all these, there will be a strategic sale of the government. So it means huge money is going to withdraw from these PSUs. And the second is, it is also totally willing to sell away the loss-making PSUs. On the other side, in the budgets, the transport and irrigation sector will be given a due emphasis. So finally, to promote the foreign investments, repatriation of the returns and the rules for that will be simplified. And the bankruptcy code, bankruptcy and insolvency code, GST law are also expected to be passed in this budget session. And coming to the Siachen, now it is the highest battlefield in the world, and you know the stand of India and Pakistan on this matter. India is placed advantageously in the Siachen glacier compared to Pakistan. It is majorly due to the failure of the demarcation of the boundaries by the Britishers. So what they said is, beyond a point, they call it as and the line continues beyond the glaciers, but they did not demarcate the line perfectly. So in this context, the Siachen, the greater enemy is not the opponent, the Pakistan. Greater enemy is the climate over there. So again, an avalanche took the 10 more soldiers of India yesterday. And next, India ratifies Convention on Compensatory Convention on Supplementary Compensation. Now, what is this law is about? Now, India's civil nuclear liability law, it has section 17 which talks about right to recourse. It means in case of a nuclear accident, a nuclear operator can claim the liabilities from the manufacturer. So what the CSC says is the operator has to be solely responsible for the any damage or any failure. And it says that, which has been come into signed in 1997, all the signatory countries can draw the funds if necessary in case of a nuclear accident. So they maintain a common pool of fund, and this fund will be given in the case of a nuclear accident. It means it appears to be good on the face of it. Its objective is actually meant to protect the nuclear material manufacturers or nuclear equipment manufacturers in the case of the damages. For example, if you see, when the nuclear meltdown has occurred in Japan, so the nuclear equipment manufacturer, Daiichi, it was not sanctioned or it was not imposed penalties because there was no such a liability law. So now, India liability law is criticized by the United States as against to the Convention on Supplementary Compensation because it has a right to recourse which also makes the manufacturer liable. And coming to a racist attack in Bangalore, so now India is highly a color prejudiced society which has a preference for fairness. So in this context, it also has poor tolerance for the respecting of human dignity and people who look different. It is reflected in the attacks on northeastern people in Bengaluru and also in Delhi, and also attack on the Africans which are increasing. So in this context, Indians shall learn the values of the diversity and tolerance which are been very central to its civilization. 50% of quota for women in panchayats. Already Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh have passed laws to raise the quota for women in panchayats up to 50%. The central government wants to make it a uniform law throughout the country through the amendment of 73rd Amendment Act. So in this context, the bill went through the committee and finally lapsed during the UPA government. Now the government wants to bring back the same bill. So with regard to the Taliban talks, now during the Karzai era, there are red lines on the Taliban talks. What are these red lines? Before initiation of any talks, the Taliban shall accept the constitution of Afghanistan and they shall leave the terror. These are the preconditions. Now, what Abdullah, the chief executive of Afghanistan, says is there are no such preconditions for the talks with Taliban. And to the popular belief that India is being kept aside on the Taliban talks, he clarifies that India is always kept in the loop because India has the stakes in the stability of the Afghanistan. And on the other hand, the Quadrilateral Cooperation Group and its talks are going to start in the coming week. So what it consists of? United States, China, Pakistan and Afghanistan. So the talks with Taliban, they are towards progressive or stability of Afghanistan. But however, the Pakistan role is very much suspected in this scenario. So finally what we can say is this. India has a special partnership agreement, that is strategic partnership agreement with Afghanistan. And India is the first country to sign that agreement with Afghanistan. So, but however, from 2012 onwards, there are no meetings held. So it is the time India shall take forward an active engagement with Afghanistan through its strategic partnership agreement. And in this case, the Prime Minister Modi's visit to inaugurate the Afghan parliament and he is the supply of Mi-35 helicopters to Afghanistan. So this can be seen as a departure of India from its earlier stand, where it was not intended to supply the lethal weapons to Afghanistan. So now let us see how this relationship progresses forward. So this is about the today's newspaper. So thank you very much and all the best.